What's up, everybody? It's Chad. I'm back again with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Thank you for joining me on the second episode of season 3. We are just rolling along. I have a special guest with me today, Shaun Salvaje. Did I say that right?
You did, yes.
Yes.
Salvaje.
Salvaje. Yeah, so glad I said that right. Thank you all again for joining me. We have an amazing episode today. We're going to talk a lot about New Mexico and Texas today because Shaun's actually from Texas. And I'll introduce her here in a second and everything. I just want to thank you guys for joining me. And yeah, make sure that you guys are going to be paying attention to the New Mexico legislature too, and as well as the Texas legislature. But we're going to get onto that later. Actually, we have a whole segment on those two things. So we'll talk more about it. And I'll give you guys all the good tips then. But without further ado, Shaun, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yes, hi, I'm Shaun Salvaje. I'm the host of Highly Informed. Highly Informed is a video podcast. Right now, you can find it on Beard Bros Media and also at highlyinformed.com. It's all about entheogenic education and news you can use when it comes to the world of cannabis and psychedelics. So I am super happy to be here with you, Chad. We first connected during the pandemic, I think, right?
Around that time, it was like towards the end of it when we're all in Clubhouse. It was like 4 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but in that time, I mean, things have been popping. So here in Texas, I'm the Veteran Affairs Director for the Texas Cannabis Collective. We're a nonprofit organization that's all about helping Texas to decriminalize the plant and ensure that we're seeing penalty reductions for people who have otherwise had their lives affected by incarceration or unjust laws. So we're working on that side and the advocacy side, but I also do a lot of communication strategy and ancillary work. I've worked with a few different brands in other states. So I am an ancillary services as a communication strategist. I've worked with brands in California, Colorado, New York, like all across America. So the work that I'm doing here in Texas, we're making sure that we're doing things that are right for Texans, and right for our region of the world, but also in alignment and having learned from some of the mistakes and also some of the smart moves that other players have made in other industries. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, especially with a sister state like New Mexico. I'm a Tejana. So I know, our neighbors next door, I actually used to live on White Sands Missile Base when I was a little kid. So popping between states was a normal thing for us between El Paso and White Sands and, Albuquerque. So I'm so excited to be here and be with your audience. Actually, it's like coming home to an extent. I do remember the White Sands of the desert. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And what's funny is actually we grew up around the same area. I'm from Alamogordo, which is like 40 minutes away from the missile range. And where I live now in Las Cruces, it's just on the other side of the mountain. Which that's funny. I actually used to work there when I first got out of the military and I moved back. I was working at the missile range. So that's pretty funny you mentioned that. Yeah, it's still there and White Sands is still blowing around everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, and I love it. I actually took my sons a few seasons ago. I took them snowboarding or sandboarding at the White Sands at the national park because you can go do that. You can sled the dunes and it's actually incredible and beautiful. I highly recommend. I don't think people realize how gorgeous New Mexico really can be. Like it's so understated. So like looking at camping out, seeing the stars, enjoying a good fire, hearing the coyotes howl, and then surfing White Sands is a great weekend.
And now you can do it all stoned if you want.
Now you can do it safely, stoned, yes, with a plant, with your medication, and not worry too much about being harassed by the police, which is really kind of an incredible thing. Like you should be able to go out, enjoy nature with a little nature. That shouldn't really be an issue as long as you're doing no harm. So congratulations to you guys. Hoping we can get the same for the Lone Star State.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, me too. You guys like to come over here and go to Ruidoso and Cloudcroft, the Sacramento Mountain area. And, we see a lot of Texans there. So, yeah, it's great that you guys get to enjoy that. But it'd be great for us to be able to go to Texas and check your guys' stuff out and be able to enjoy the same thing, too. And, of course, that you guys deserve to have the same right that we do, too, here in this state,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, as everybody around the country. But Before we move on, I want to mention, you're so humble. Before we continue, I want to mention that Shaun is actually an Air Force veteran, retired. So thank you so much for your service, battle.
Yes, no problem. Thank you too, brother. That's actually like kind of what brought me into cannabis, to be frank, was I served in the Air Force for 12 to 13 years. I was a military photojournalist.
Mhm,
Deployed to Afghanistan, did some time, came back with a few issues. I eventually was medically retired out,
mhm,
and the docs were looking at several different options to help me with some of the conditions that I was having difficulties with, especially migraines and inflammation throughout my body, and PTSD, which is something that a lot of veterans come back home experiencing, given the environmental hazards and the continuous stress that you experience in a deployed environment. And the docs gave me two options. I really appreciate that my neurologist, so I was very lucky I got to work with a neurologist out of NYU.
yeah.
So top of the field. And he said, this was around 2018. He said, I'm going to be really frank with you. There's still a lot about the human brain that we don't understand. But here's what I can do. I can do a biopsy. We can biopsy and slice into your brain and try to figure it out. In the meantime, the best option that I can give you is a stack of prescriptions to run through so we can try to start figuring out what can help mitigate symptoms. And I just didn't want any part of that. I'd always been really conscious about my health and fitness. I grew up like old school Mexicana, Vicks Vaporub, we don't go to the doctor.
Yep.
Like,
Egg under the bed.
yeah. So I was like, doc, I'm gonna take a rain check on you slicing into my brain just to figure things out. I have an idea. I know I have an idea. Let me come back. We'll talk later. If things get crazy, I'll come back. And I never came back because I turned instead to cannabis, and it allowed me to be present, to learn how to manage my symptoms, to be able to take care of and provide for my family in New York City, and also following our move back home to Texas. I mean, that's pretty tremendous. So slicing through my brain, or picking up a plant, it was an easy choice.
So
Yeah,
did you ever
but
use cannabis
I was
before
in the
that?
military.
You
Yes.
were, yeah, which is great, and then like that aspect, is a huge thing because you have a lot of experience with that and everything. Actually, last year I had my friend Waxy Brown on. He's from Missouri, pretty much the same thing
Mm.
we do, but he's in Missouri, and he did what you did, but in the Navy. So like it's kind of funny. I was like, dang, that's kind of interesting. I'm meeting a lot of
Oh yeah,
cannabis media people.
we all used to work together. So the
Yeah.
great part, yeah, I was in the Air Force, and this was my frustration. I was in the Air Force. Like, we all joke with each other when we're in the service. We all tease each other, like, who's the best and who has it the easiest. And they always say, of course, the Air Force has it the easiest. And I always like to joke, like, well, we're the smartest. Like, we're all getting paid the same, but I have a better quality of life. And that
Yeah.
joke,
No
like,
shit.
well, that joke bit me in the ass, because it's funny that you mentioned your friend in the Navy. The work that I did was always joint service operations. So I ended up previously married to a Marine, like, who in the military doesn't have that first marriage to someone else in the service. It happens. I've been there. I've done it. We all learn. But
Right.
yes, I had married to a Marine, joint training. Did I ever deploy for the Air Force? Not one time. I deployed consistently for the Army. So I would always think that I was going to end up on some nice deployment, and I would end up with the soldiers who, I'm not going to lie, y'all don't have the better coffee. They don't really care what you get sometimes. You're lucky
No.
if you get anything. So my little princess behind definitely had to soldier up every now and then.
That's funny. I was intel, I was military intel as an interrogator. And so
Oh,
we
we
worked
love
with,
the intel guys.
yeah, of course. Yeah, right. Like asking
Yeah.
us questions.
I went to what is it? CST. I went to CST with a bunch of linguists and intel guys, and one of them told me they were like special operators on a special like underwater project. And they're such smart asses because they're intel guys, so they have access to information that they can tell you something that is totally bullshit. And if you're a genuine person, you're like, really? But they're smart enough to frame it in a way where you actually believe the most nonsensical nonsense. So they always kept me on my toes. Funny guys, those intel guys. They got a weird sense of humor sometimes.
Oh, you're telling me being around a bunch of them, it was like, I don't know who's messing with me right now. Like, and that's the point, I guess. But like one of the guys, he was funny, we're off base, and he told someone asked him, "What do you do in the army?" He was like, "Oh, I'm a 99 Zulu." And they're like, "Oh, what's that?" He was like, "I'm a combat ninja."
Yeah. Yeah.
We
I
believed him.
remember someone had one going for a while, and it was funny because they had said, darn it, I lost the joke because someone just buzzed me and beamed me, but I'll come back with it. I don't remember. Oh, it was like something about, well, actually, and it was a joke about Stargate and something about the Terminator. I don't know what is the Skynet. And
Yes,
they were
Skynet,
saying they were
yes.
working on a project like Skynet, but then actually now, I don't want to dive too deep into politics, especially us being from the military. We're used to like having to operate. I worked under 3 different administrations. I
Excuse me.
in the um, I started in the Bush administration. I worked for the Obama administration. I retired out of the Trump administration. So, but even with the new administration coming in, just the fact that we have Project Stargate now, I believe. I don't know if you heard about it, but
I
some of
just
the
heard about
funny
it
jokes
today. Yeah.
we used to tell funny jokes that we thought like, haha, that's so fun. Now it's like actually, yeah, that's Operation Stargate, I guess. That's a thing now. So it's a fun world we're living in. I don't know what to expect next. But I guess
You're
it's like,
telling me.
yeah, I guess that's why we're all trying to light up a little bit and lighten up.
Yeah, and being in the military, we know how to at least lighten up in that sense, and we have different coping mechanisms than other people. So
For
it may be
sure.
a little, yeah, sometimes we're a little misunderstood.
Oh, I think
But
the dark sense of humor though is gonna become something or that could become helpful, like the coping strategies and mechanisms that people develop while they're deployed may actually like it so cracks me up when I hear Andrew Huberman tell us about a new mental toughness exercise that you can do, and it reminds me of like some exercise that you probably learned how to do overseas to manage stress.
yeah,
And so I think whatever's happening with the nation right now, the veterans will have an opportunity to help bring them around, sit around the fire, light one up, and realize like like a hot wash, like sometimes shit goes down and you can't just stay in the shit. You actually have to come bring the family around the circle, bring the community together, remind each other that we're in it together, and get rally the troops around the fire and
yeah,
remember that we're all humans and we're still connecting. We're still going to figure this out. We're still living our everyday lives, no matter what side you land on, and that life is bigger than this moment. We're
yeah,
figuring things out, but
yeah.
I digress.
100%. Thank you. I mean, and I appreciate all of that for sure, and and appreciate your service again. But I also wanted to ask, were you ever an anchor on AFN?
So I was actually, it's so funny that you bring that up. I was
And if you
on.
guys don't know, AFN is Armed Forces Network. It's pretty much the military TV.
Yeah, it is kind of funny, like, to be frank, um, it is funny. I was the head anchor at the Defense Media Activity, which it's the headquarters for, like, AFN. It's the headquarters for so I was a news anchor for, like, the Pentagon, essentially,
Yeah,
um, and it kinda cracks me up because if you would have told me all those years ago that all of the skills and training and organization that I learned as a documentary producer, as a combat photojournalist, and then later as a news anchor, because that transition from being a photojournalist to being an anchor, huge difference,
yeah,
especially when we're talking about when you get to that level on that AFN level, there are parts where you're telling a story and you're telling the airman's story or the soldier's story, and you're making sure that you're connecting with that human experience because that's what's real, the real
yeah,
people behind the uniform. But then you do transition at a certain point and you get into leadership, strategy, and communication. And, at that, I basically was a representative for the office of the Secretary of the Air Force at that time. So to take all those skills and now be doing this in cannabis, it does kind of make like,
yeah,
I never saw that coming. Especially because, my family history, it's not my family history, but just growing up with the culture. I did grow up in a mixed background, like split between Minnesota and Texas. And I did grow up in the projects. So you see cannabis, you see how policing was being done in the 90s. I am an 80s baby. I'm an older millennial. People don't realize. But and the dichotomy between seeing how law enforcement handled it then, how we're still kind of handling it now in some ways, but then also the progress that we're making, and then having had to like completely leave that part, go into the military, because you're not going to mess around with any controlled substance when you're active duty in the military, especially
Amen
given
to that.
the level of trust that I was given to
Mhm.
be a representative at the level that I was as an anchor. Like AFN is kind of silly, but then as you get deeper into it, you realize that it is actually kind of serious. After AFN, like everything that happens behind the scenes, um, especially when it comes to briefing the public on foreign affairs and what what military actions really look like. I think we've had some challenges recently, but it's interesting to take that knowledge and wisdom and application, learn how we can do things better and focus it more. Again, it's always this call to public service. So how can we focus it more on exactly that, the people, the stories, and connecting folks and bringing in an element of good, healthy, strategic communication, but not in a way that's manipulative, in a way where we're actually informing the populace, so that way we can start to build real frameworks. Like this is how I ended up doing the work that I do with the Texas Ledge, is we've got to educate the public to build out the frameworks and work with the experts and industry operators who have already learned from years of iterations of evolution
Mhm.
to do this right. And you see how that sometimes goes sideways when you're in the military, like we saw with the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And you just, for some of us veterans, it just becomes this like compulsion. You can't help yourself but want to help set things up right because somebody's got to do it. And I
Yeah.
always say at the end of the day, all I really want to do is just retire. I just want to be able to grow my plants in my backyard and have my medicine the way, fresh grown at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
Nice. So however I got to move the ledge and however we got to work to write our laws so that way people can be able to do that and we can support industries and build out medical programs too to support access, then I guess I got to show up, and that's what I'm doing with myself these days.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because when you get out, you got to do something, and I'm glad that other veterans are finding more like leadership roles to kind of fall into like this, because we more or less know how to like lead, especially lead by example in that sense when it comes to things like this. And
Yeah.
we know that it's a fight, and we know that it's going to be a fight, and it's like the hurry up and wait thing. It's like, oh, you're going to test my waiting skills all day,
Oh
kind
yeah,
of thing.
I got that. I got that.
Yeah, it's
You
like,
need
oh,
me to
we're
be
good.
at the ledge until 3 a.m.? Easy money. Like, have you ever heard of waiting for a flight all day at the airport with your bags in a full gear, like your flight out of Afghanistan into Turkey or something, and you're waiting for like what, 4 days? I'm fine
God,
staying at the ledge for a day or two. That's not a problem. I got it. But
yeah, it's like this is
yeah,
cool.
I mean, and that's the power. I think that's the thing about what I really am excited to see this year with the New Mexico, what y'all have going on, and then hopefully here in Texas, because we really need folks to show up. But there is so much power in, veterans are so much more capable than what folks might believe.
Yeah.
Often, like people talk about veterans in a way where they're trying to look at it from a lens of charity, but
Mhm.
the reality is there's so many veterans who are so capable at multiple, projects with complicated logistics, having organized, battle plans to execute missions in very difficult, austere environments. And so I think people don't realize, like, well, if you're not getting shot at while you're also trying to execute a plan, it's a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's way easier, and like you're not getting
I
yelled
feel
at.
like the legacy operators might, understand a bit of that. So let's bring it all forward.
100%. And speaking of the New Mexico and Texas legislature, I mean, if there's nothing else you want to talk about yourself, we can go ahead and move on to that one if you'd like, because I mean, You shared a lot about
Woo!
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Texas Ledge, we've got a lot going on. Where do you want to start? It's complicated.
So
Um,
what I'll do is I'll start with updating everybody with New Mexico first because that'll be quick, and then we'll get on to Texas because I know that's going to take a little bit longer. And there's some stuff I'm still learning about the Texas legislature and stuff like that. So I'm gonna update everybody about the New Mexico one. If you guys didn't know, was it a couple days ago or a day ago? Was the beginning of the New Mexico legislature actually yesterday? I got my days mixed up now, but that's at the time of this recording. Is when the New Mexico legislature started. It started at noon, and then the governor later on did her state of the state address, which I missed. I had some meeting I had to go to, but nothing really happens in the first week of the New Mexico legislature. So the only thing I really have to update is just those same two bills that I told you guys about. The one that talks about licensing, which is really just cleaning up the language to make sure people are getting their background checks, so that way the right people get in the industry, and certain people that shouldn't be in the industry don't get in the industry. And it's just another safeguard that we have that will probably help us, because when we first opened up, we were having issues with background checks with the federal government. So people weren't getting federal background checks. And so that was kind of an issue, and they try to fix it. Looks like they're cleaning it up a little bit more. And of course, the other one that I told you guys about was getting rid of the taxes here in New Mexico. Well, not getting rid of, but ensuring that taxes don't increase here in New Mexico further than what they are. Right now, it's at 12%, but when you add the state and local tax, it goes on to 20%. It is geared to go to 20 or 13%, so increase by 1%. But every year after this year, it's supposed to increase by 1% until 2030, and it will be close to 30% at that point. And if that happens, we'll see traditional market or illicit market activities start to increase even further than what they already are. Because when people pay too many taxes, they know where to go where they don't have to pay for taxes, and end up paying a lot more for something that they really shouldn't be paying that much for. Those are the two bills right now that are in the legislature. The second one I told you about, that one was sent to me by a source, so it's not officially in the legislature yet. It doesn't have a number. I think it's in there, but it doesn't have a designated number, so it's not going to pop up. Nothing really happens for like the first week and a half. Just bills will get introduced. If you guys want to stay updated to that, make sure you follow my socials and stuff like that, because it's going to be really quick moving. The session's 60 days, but it's going to be moving very quickly. And sometimes in the morning, nothing's going to happen, but later on in the late morning, all hell broke loose, and I have to go to Santa Fe. So be on your toes, be ready, and I'll be here to let you guys know. But that's pretty much everything that's going on in the New Mexico market. Let's jump over to the Texas legislature. So tell me, what's going on so far?
ooh, well, there's a few bills that we are seeing come through the ledge, through the House, that we've definitely seen before. But I think the big headliner is SB3,
Yes.
which Dan Patrick and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is behind. He's got Senator Charles Perry on that one as well, who was a participant in special sessions on hemp last year. So the
Yeah.
ledge did actually hold a few special sessions to hear some issues. And they shared a lot of information with us about their concerns.
Yeah.
The biggest one is obviously going to be the public health concern and age. Which, the interesting conversation that we were having with legislators at that time was there was there are some actors that it's been suggested by the legislators that there are some actors in the industry who are selling products to minors. And the conversation that we're trying to have with them that is that if there are any serious actors in the industry, there are no serious good actors in the industry who are interested in selling to minors. In fact, we would really love to have the ledge's help with setting up age gating processes to make sure no matter where consumers are choosing to buy their product, whether it's with a brick and mortar retailer, on with a brand via, I guess, with via a website, direct to sales to consumer has really popped off in a big way. Or if I know this might be an unpopular opinion, I have seen some top shelf product in convenience stores. And it does beg the question about OTC availability, because there are some products that we can get at convenience stores because
Mhm.
convenience stores are convenient. And in a state as big as Texas, um, we're looking at some massive complications when we do get to the place where we're going to open up our market, because we need to make sure that we can bring folks in on the regulated side, but then also set up enough healthy, well-run establishments that people can actually have access. Because what we've seen in other states, especially when you do a lot of limited licensing, is that the program, and it's almost designed to collapse in on itself, because you don't have there's not enough to support the demand.
Yep.
So this will be interesting because hemp and medical, there's an interesting dichotomy there. There are a lot of medical patients. One bill that we have coming forward that I'm really excited about, or looking forward to learning more about and seeing if there's room for conversation as far as structuring, um, is SB 734, which is by Menendez. And what that bill proposes is an expansion of the medical program, which has been, we've seen medical bills pushed forward a couple of times, but without a whole lot of traction. And using that, because we already have that low THC program.
Mhm.
And so one thing about SB 734 is that I noticed in the edits to the bill from previous versions, they took that out, that specific languaging about low dose. And so what that tells me is that our regulators, at least, and now we have to keep in mind, this is the bill filed by a Democrat, and we're in this really interesting time period right now, just statewide, not just statewide, state by state and nationally, where there's been a transfer of power at the level of the presidency, at the level of the House of the Representatives. Many agencies are, in question right now. And so that's going to influence, not, yes, we do decide things federally, but we also do regulate these kinds of markets on a state regulatory level. So it's really like an interesting analysis of how we make the bread
Mhm.
in the United States. And there's a lot of unknowns right now. Like, we heard, and I'm sorry if I'm just going to keep going,
No,
interrupt
no,
it
please.
any time. But we had the headline that came out recently about the US Health and Human Services reclassifying. They're making definitions because they're trying to get very precise with THCA, and then you and I were talking about THCC. So, and that just came out 2 days ago. So basically, Health and Human Services is aligning their position with what the DEA tried to suggest a few months ago. And that kind of throws into question the whole hemp market. So
Yes.
bringing it all back to Texas, like, what do our constituents in Texas and what do our friends in New Mexico need to know? We have SB3, which is it's a THC killer. It wants to cancel all THC. And that's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's bill that he's pushing forward. Then we have SB 734, which is medical expansion. They do have numbers for dispos, cultivation, and the numbers at first looked actually kind of good. I can pull them up later in the conversation.
Yeah.
But they actually look good, and there were stipulations. Because one thing I think legislators are starting to realize also is that they're just because consumers are consuming hemp doesn't mean, like, this is tough, because there are consumers who will go to hemp retailers who are not looking specifically for a medical product, but they are consuming for wellness.
Mhm.
And they want to be able to protect their access to that, because it has been very helpful, for people like me, when we're
Mhm.
talking about nutraceutical or supplemental health opportunities. It is helpful to be able to go to a hemp retailer and purchase a product, you
Yeah.
know, and to have that choice and that right. And it is because of hemp that we have been able to innovate. Like, it's this weird circular, I think when we talked earlier, we talked about the snake eating its tail. And
Yes.
I know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like in California, they're really against their hemp market because they already had a regulated, established cannabis market where
That's what's
people had,
happening here.
right, where you have to
Yeah.
pay millions of dollars for your
Mhm.
licensing, right? But in a prohibition state like Texas, our hemp market is the thing. It is the thing that is saving the market and providing access to the people because we don't have a regulated THC market, So, and where the medical program needs time to grow because anyone who's an operator in this industry knows no matter what state you're in, it takes time to set up the program. So, as ambitious as we can be with the legislation and say by this date, we're going to have a medical program, we know it's going to take probably 3 times more to actually get that done and actually get it running at a place where it's actually taking care of the patients. So, to alleviate that issue, there is, I think, a window where hemp can serve the need, and we can find a way for both of these things to work in Texas. And we have an opportunity at a very unique recipe that no one else has had. We got something real special here in Texas, and the reality is that I would love for our, legislators who have concerns to recognize that we have the chance to structure something like no other state and to do it in a way where we can support our medical market as it comes online while also supporting local Texas operators and businesses and access to the plant while we build this thing out. Because so often, this is just like industry in America. So often we like boop, 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 try to rush to solutions. And what we really need to do is be methodical about this, but it doesn't mean we need to delay progress. Like we seem to get so tangled up in the nuance and the syntax and the language of things that we delay some progress. We can work with experts now. We have already done something really good that is actually addressing a lot of issues as far as access and safe access, especially. Like you're not having people having to go to sources for their, this supplemental herb. They're not having to go to sources that are, less comfortable than being able to go to a trusted retail store where you have a certificate of analysis and the person behind the counter and that they're always going to be there and you can build and develop a healthy relationship and rapport. Um, so I'm really hoping our more conservative legislators will see that we're actually really trying to help them solve for the issue
Yeah.
of their concerns about public safety in multiple ways. And we're asking for is the runway to be able to do it and to protect those Texas operators who have helped to build this from the ground out. Because unlike, what I understand in California, the frustration because of the definition of THCA, the legal definition of THCA, allowing a loophole where you have hemp operators who don't have as high overhead costs. But I have to, share that as we're like building an industry that is supposed to outperform any single business, because it should be multiple decades. We want to build
Mhm.
something long lasting.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
that we have to, yes, over regulation in California was perhaps too much and very expensive. And we've seen that play out over and over and over and over in various states. And we can do things differently here and solve for that and help change laws there. The
Yeah.
reality is that when we write laws in the United States, it's so much harder to walk it back. And that's just the difference between how we do state by state legislation. So
Yeah.
we do have to look at what have other states done, but we also have to understand that as a union of multiple states, we all agreed to be united in this, but we're also going to do things our own way.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping in Texas we can figure it out. I like SB 734 for the medical expansion. It looks good.
Mhm.
It looks responsible. It looks like people really thought about it. I think there's some room to grow, but I was looking like maybe some 300 licenses distributed over regional areas. So they're thinking about how many
Oof.
people
That's
actually
a lot.
want it and how many people, like if you're in a more rural conservative area that doesn't want cannabis, you're not going to need as many dispensaries if you're in as a city populace. So they are thinking about these kinds of things. um so it's just, we got a lot going on, and there is a hemp bill by Senator Rosenthal to propose legislation to regulate hemp. So
Yeah.
the ideas are there, but that's an HB. That means it's a House bill,
Mhm.
and the House bills can be heard, but if they don't get through the House, they don't make it to the Senate. The Senate
Yeah.
bills being heard at the Senate level first will then go to the House. And when you get heard at the Senate level, sometimes things move a lot faster. So because it's a Senate bill.
Yeah.
Um, that's not, I don't think, the way that the American government was designed to be, or the Texas government, because the House, remember, is the House of the people. I mean, so
Yeah.
is the Senate, but the House especially.
Hmm.
We'll have to
Usually have
see.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're in a we're in an interesting, with the whole how Burroughs was nominated and the controversies there. Regardless of your opinion, it's pretty clear there's a little bit of tension in Texas. So we'll see what happens. Some of these bills may not even have an opportunity to be heard. This might just be getting ready for what's to come. And then also with the new Trump administration, we're still not quite sure where his people are going to land on any of this. But we do know federally, agencies are trying to take moves to redefine things ahead of whatever Doge does with them, I guess. I don't really know. It's kind of an interesting time to be alive.
It
I
is. And
Woof. That is the whole brief. I wanted to just give you all the info. This is yours. Jeez.
thank you. No, that's why I was just letting you go. I was like, no, go, sister, let it fly. Because
Oh my
I want you to get
God.
all the information out, and I can pick everything from there. Um,
Yes.
what I was getting from that, and there's a lot of things that is happening in Texas, but you guys are also setting yourselves up to be the way to regulate cannabis, because we have overregulated cannabis way too much, and we see that that causes issues. There's a
Mm,
happy median when it comes to this kind of thing. Not too loose, not too strict. It has to be just right, that little Goldilocks zone. Even we live in a Goldilocks zone in the universe. They said if we're too far, too
mhm,
close, we wouldn't exist. So
mhm.
this has to exist in the same little area, and we have to do this right. And Texas might be on on the right path accidentally. Because you have these products already in the gas stations. You already have them already available, just almost like the alcohol products are, which
Yes.
normalizes it, and that kills stigma. But you have people that are in the representative roles that are telling you otherwise. But the citizens of the state are kind of making them look like liars, because it's like, well, we really
Well,
want this. It's the biggest market in the nation. Like, I don't know
that's
what to
the
tell
thing.
you.
It is already. It's a $5 billion market. It's cute
Mhm.
when folks want to talk about, well, what are their projections for what it can do? Well, I'll tell you what it already did.
Yeah.
Uh, at least on the hemp side, there's 50,000 folks in the state of Texas employed by the hemp industry, and hemp, yes, with THCA, did produce $5 billion. So it's a very serious conversation. Now, one thing out of staters might not understand about Texas, and I think that maybe you'll get it a little bit more, especially like at the inauguration speech where we're hearing things like drill, baby, drill, is that Texas, the money for other states is an incredible opportunity. And it is an incredible opportunity for Lone Star State too, and would be huge, especially because we're an agriculture state. And to be fair and honest, we're the third coast, and we're already outperforming other markets. Like I said, 5 billion. Um, but that is a drop in the bucket when you're looking at oil money and money coming in from other places. And as we have seen, Texas has become some kind of magnet for a whole lot of power. And a whole lot of money and a whole lot of influence. So we'll see what happens. I think there are a lot of good people on both sides that want to see this done. Though one thing, when I was at the ledge for opening week and speaking directly with representatives, one thing was very clear, even with those more conservative representatives who wanted to be for something related to cannabis, but are, beheld, they got to answer to their constituents, and some of their constituents are really against it. They had suggested that it's really not a red or blue issue anymore, that for the most part, everybody wants this. And they know that because they also stand on that side. But we do have to, answer to constituents in rural areas that have their concerns about their changes in their way of life. So I
Yeah.
hear you. I hear it. We just have to have those conversations and get that education out there, because it's a lot of misunderstanding, I think.
Yeah.
Especially once you realize, like, especially in the veteran population, we're talking about the military, the cannabis, and we're seeing in states where they've legalized or have some form of a hemp market, a cannabis market, or a medical market, that you're seeing a reduction in opioid abuse, and less instances of heroin addictions, and more opportunity for healing. So I'm hopeful. I don't know. Texas has this very unique thing. And yeah, I don't think it was accidental either. I know we're saying accidental, but I feel like the industry operators here are very smart.
Mhm.
Um, and not by design were they trying to pull the wool over legislators' eyes. All they were doing was answering consumer demand. The
Yeah.
legislators told us what the law was and how to stay within that measure of the law. And, whether they agree, whether that has or has not been done, it's yet to be litigated, but there's no way to actually prosecute on anything, because it looks like the hemp operators have operated according to the law. And so we've already structured an open market. And isn't that very Texan of us to have an open market
Yeah.
and to approach it in this way, which I think is a much healthier way of governance than over-regulating and then trying to pull back. And now we're saying, even with all that over-regulation, states like New York and other, they got shut down by lawsuits.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work too much either. Like, you still got sued. Let's stay more open, reduce the opportunity for lawsuits, and build the safe regulation through understanding research and development, like investing into science, investing into R&D, and investing into building out the industry like a smart Texan would if they were building a business. Like, it's very common sense, actually. I mean, it's like cattle ranching. There's steps to this, seed, sow,
Yeah.
time, and harvest, right? So I could rant though, and I feel like I have been. I'm so sorry. You got me on one.
No, no. I mean, you're passionate. You're teaching everybody, and especially the New Mexicans. And some of my listeners are from Texas, so some of these people listening are getting educated. And why you're talking. So I'm just sitting here letting you do it because some of these people need to hear this and need to understand what's going on. Because what happens
Mhm.
in Texas affects us directly here in New Mexico.
Mhm.
I know the operators in Sutherland Park, Hobbs, and Carlsbad lick their chops. When Dan Patrick made that announcement for the THC ban, because that just means more money for New Mexico for longer periods of time. However, that
Their
also,
website.
yeah, like it's great for us, but at the same time, there's so many Texans and so many of my friends even in El Paso that are getting arrested even now still for
Oh,
cannabis possession, and still like they work at dispensaries and like have to go back and forth, and it's kind of a mess. Like they're fearful. They're like, I work in a legal industry just minutes away from my home, but I'm getting harassed by my home state because they haven't got their heads out their asses and figured this out yet. But yet we have these hemp places on the others, because in El Paso the hemp stuff isn't really as popular as it is in the other parts of Texas, just for the fact that it's so close to New Mexico that most of the people just take that trip over to New Mexico, get cannabis, and just go back. There are
yeah.
some CBD hemp, THCA stuff going on there, but it's nothing compared to what is going back and forth, kind of situation. So
Well,
it's
and a lot
different.
of consumers don't like the Health and Human Services redefining and DEA redefining,
Let's talk about that. Let's clarify that a little bit, what that actually means. And to be honest, I don't think we really know what it actually means. And the government probably doesn't even really know what that actually means. And we're probably not going to find that out for a few months.
Well, that's kind of, yeah, my question. I mean, so the HHS and DEA are trying to say that they want the total measure of THC in a plant for testing purposes to be include the THCC.
Yeah.
So my first thought was, wait, are they trying to change the definition of THCA?
Yeah.
No, actually, there's two different molecules. I want to know there are two different molecules, and I want to know who told them about THCC because I don't like I want to say it, but I don't want to say it. THCA, there, it's there for sure, and it would increase the total volume of THC, but the THCC is present in far less quantities than the THCA. So, as far as the molecule, so part of me is thinking, do they think that this is the fast pitch to catch everybody? If that is the case, they might have missed out on a science lesson. Like, and then that kind of makes me laugh a little bit, but
Yeah.
this is the kind of stuff where if we could just cut the nonsense out and stop trying to fuck around with legalese. Pardon me, I'm so sorry if I can't curse on
Oh, by all
new.
means, you can cuss all
Are
you
we
want.
good? I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
what
you're good. Yeah.
are.
We're veterans. I understand it.
Just stop fucking around with this legalese and trying to play this gotcha game. We could actually invest in the science of all of this, and
Mhm.
they could break down like, so THCA is your tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, and THCC is a tetrahydrocannabichromine. I'm not a scientist, and I'm going to get one of my friends to break this down for sure. Like Dr. Riley Kirk, paging Dr. Riley Kirk.
I'd love to have her on my show too. That'd be so
Oh
great.
man, that would be awesome. They're great.
Yeah,
They're so wonderful.
they
I'm
are.
hoping to try to get them out for South by Southwest, and we'll definitely have to dive into that because we're going to have an opportunity for New Mexicans who want to come over and visit Texas and come hang out for in Austin for South by. It sounds like uh, from the locals, it sounds like the week of March 10th is essentially going to be a little cannabis week in Austin. So but more to come. But
I might
yeah,
be there for that, so I might be
oh,
there. So
it's gonna be super it's gonna be really good. We'll definitely have to dive in because that'll be where we can share with people like how can they participate, and I want to get into that for sure. Because really the ledge, like we could talk, I could talk till I was blue in the face clearly, but the reality is hearing it just from me isn't going to be enough. We need everybody's individual stories. We need to hear from you. Texans need to hear from their neighbors and
yeah,
their folks that they work with, the people that they see in their communities that they don't know are consumers. And we have to start to have this conversation about normalization because this is not just some, recreational market. We even within the industry, we don't refer to it that way. It's adult use, because for some folks, it's not just for recreation. For some, it is, and they have the right to do that. Like everybody
mhm,
has the right. Some folks say, we're all right with whiskey. It's all
yeah,
right if you have a bourbon. It
yeah.
should be just as all right if you have a cigar. You could have a joint without any judgment. But back to THCA and THCC. The cannabichromine, the THCC, is also prevalent. It's present in the plant before decarboxylation. So I
Mhm,
think this is the DA and HHS's way of trying to capture that uh, loophole. I don't know, gray area where THCA lives. But the reality is, THCA is more present. I
mhm.
think THCC though is the ingredient that is psychoactive. So that might be the nuance of that language. I'll be frank with y'all. This just came out on Monday, and I really got to dive into it and reach
Me
out
too.
to the scientists to get a full breakdown. But this is how I'm understanding it.
Tell them to break it
So
down Barney style.
yeah. So how does that matter to operators in New Mexico or Texas or consumers? That's got everything to do with, I think, the hemp and the farm bill and
Mhm.
what kind of conversation they're having around the farm bill to address hemp specifically. So we're having this conversation on state levels as well as on a federal level, and the conversation they have at that federal level will definitely inform what the states do, especially here in the South and with the new administration.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
Governor Abbott, I thought I saw Governor Abbott at the inauguration. So
I'm sure he was there for sure.
right. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of those folks are going to be out here in Texas. So we'll see. This is interesting to see how this is going to play out.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because and we're speaking earlier about Republicans, this and that. Most Republicans I know like cannabis. The average Republican voter, but they tend to like elect people that hate cannabis and go against it. So it's kind of like, well, are you really are you really doing what your constituents want, or are you doing what just you want, and then making your constituents happy with a present here and now and then? Like, oh, well, you don't have
Well,
cannabis, but you have this and this. Like, I'm not too sure, like the thought process of it.
in some of those rural areas, they do see some negative consequences as far as like you do have some it's like here's what I saw at the special legislative session. And I'm not going to say whether this is true or not because I would want to have provide you with data, but I'll give you my assessment at least, like
Mhm.
from the ground level. And also for as a mom. What I noticed in the special sessions, we had two, and I do want to get into the fact that the hemp industry is largely, I believe, largely why we've developed such a great beverage industry in the
Mhm.
market. Like having to
That's the future.
innovate, right? And especially when we're talking about health and wellness,
Oh yeah.
healthcare, medicine, wellness, it's a different thing. And we should be able to play in both spaces, because it can do both things. And at the end of the day, the consumer and the American public to have the right denied, especially when we're learning more about the endocannabinoid system and how,
Mhm.
like, Dr. Kirk had shared with me on an episode of Highly Informed that what they're finding with patients who have PTSD and depression is that the more significant the PTSD, the more the presence of the CB1 and CB2 receptors. So you're actually there's a likelihood, and I can't say this directly because we don't have specific studies yet, but they do have the study on you have more receptors for cannabinoids in your system when you have PTSD. So what that would suggest to me, if I was interpreting it, would be, and I am interpreting it for you, but it means that you're probably cannabinoid deficient. Like
Yeah.
something has happened where you've depleted your system and you're cannabinoid deficient. So if we're talking about human systems and deficiencies, is it fair for the government to outlaw like a vitamin like vitamin D or iron? Would we do that to outlaw something that we need to maintain physiological homeostasis for the human body? I don't think so. We're not at that stage yet to be having those conversations. Like we're still, and that's where we have to pull ourselves back also a little bit as advocates, is that our legislators aren't experts in this. And
Mhm.
we do need to work with them to be good partners and help break it down in a way where they can understand the problem that's in front of them right now. And we can solve for that. What I noticed at the special session was that some of those legislators hear from a lot of moms who are very concerned about what will happen to their children. And it's a lot of concerns about previous, like maybe some of these mothers had a teenage son who took to the grass and never has an arrested development, they never pulled themselves out or didn't find their motivation. And there's parts of me as a veteran who I get a little bit salty because part of me wants to be like, ma'am, some of those issues would have persisted regardless of what choices your son was making. That has something to do with something else.
Yeah.
Then some are actually genuinely concerned and have had issues with addiction. However, I think they have correlated cannabis to that addiction. And
Mhm.
the reality is, with some of the symptoms that they're describing, it sounds like something more serious is at play. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that's where we're going to see, because I grew up also in the Panhandle, and so for every mom who thought it was like it's the pot, it was really meth or something else. So
Alcohol, yeah, or something's happening at
no.
home that's
Yeah.
alarming.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a deeper, but here's the deal is those people don't they're bringing you their pain, and if you're a legislator, you're going to answer that. And if you're a legislator and you don't know anything about cannabis except for what you've already been told, then it's hard to understand where we're coming from. But I think there's an opportunity to build bridges and then to help with education and then to also help with outreach. So let's say there is someone who is over consuming, because look, all good things in moderation. You can take anything to an extreme and do
Mhm.
some damage, even when it comes to like wellness stuff. Um, getting the children, like getting kids the education around their health and brain health, and when your frontal cortex is fully developed, and how cannabis consumption at a premature age, how that can actually affect you. I think that's important stuff, and we can
Mhm.
do that if we build out a program. If we keep
Yeah.
avoiding the conversation, we're going to keep seeing problems because we're making symptoms the issue, and correlating symptoms of other problems with cannabis use. And we've got to get really real with ourselves if we want to solve problems and take steps forward, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Because
just,
we have to show that motivation because we see so many issues with the alcohol stuff. Even
yeah.
here in the area, El Paso, they have that El Paso Fit Fam Instagram page, and all the time I see drunk driving incidents. They actually
Mhm.
have all the time like mug shots of people who got arrested for drunk driving. It's a real issue, and it's caused a lot of deaths. All the time, and unfortunately, these deaths were preventable, and they were preventable because we could have stopped or educated people more, or maybe alcohol didn't need to be that expanded and available, because I can't go anywhere without alcohol being there. I can't go to a college game, anything above high school, the movies. I can't go
Yeah.
to Walmart. It's all over.
I mean, I think it's a great opportunity for, interestingly enough, in Minnesota, they were telling me, operators up there were telling me that the craft brew industry, which I have love for anything craft, just, with my love for farmers. And I think ultimately having an ability to have a micro or craft license for our hemp operators, and then later, if when we bring on full spectrum cannabis for those operators, so that way mom and pops can stay in business,
Hmm.
is a great thing. And it's only good for the product, right? It's only good for the product because you're growing on that smaller local level. So you're really getting into the details.
Hmm.
Craft.
Yeah.
But for like in Minnesota, the craft beer, they started to see like a decline in their industry. And some of them have hopped, haha, no pun intended, they've hopped into infused beverages, and it's given their audience, like people who we're drinking their beers, another option and a healthier option, and more younger generations are opting for that. So
Hmm.
over time, all things change, and the alcohol industry has had like a really strong run. But I think after enough years of seeing, what can happen to your health over a sustained period of drinking,
The
like all,
announcement of it causing cancer, that too
yeah,
recently. Yeah,
all good
that's a
things
huge
in
one.
moderation for sure.
Mhm.
And if there's a healthier alternative, like for me, I have an autoimmune condition. So I really can't drink alcohol. It's highly inflammatory. But if I could still show up at the party and have an infused beverage, I can guarantee you that I'm not going to feel sick in the morning. There won't be a hangover. Like I'm actually putting something in my body that's good for my system. So I'm going to be in better shape than if I hadn't, and have a
Yeah.
great time. I yeah, I'm hoping we can get more folks around beverages specifically, so they can start to see it's not exactly the same. And I understand the fear around it because folks have seen a lot of damage done with the opioid crisis, with several different drug epidemics we've had in the United States, and they don't want to do that again. But I think
Yeah.
cannabis can actually like help us find a new and better way. So we're figuring it out. I mean, we also have psychedelics bills that are out there in Texas. I
Good
don't
to
would
hear.
bill numbers for you, but I know that, people like former Governor Rick Perry is all about ibogaine, and he's, veterans are testifying to the power of that. So we're learning more and more about our natural world, natural sciences, natural health. And I want to make sure Texas protects its opportunity to be in those spaces, because it looks like we could play a big role in leadership if we step up to it. Um,
100%. Like I said, the way you guys are going about the THCA thing, it's the capitalist way that you should do business. It's it should be tightened up a little bit on the regulation. That's fine, but it's not
right.
over regulated already. And trying to figure it out that way. It's kind of like, okay, we need to fix it here. Versus just well, we're going to tighten it up here, and then we're loosely going to do things, and then when things happen, we're going to blame it and then re-tighten it up again. That
Yeah.
just sounds like a mess.
And it's how you get real frustrated that's how you put 50,000 jobs that already exist and are already stabilized in jeopardy.
Yes.
So let's not do that. We already have 50,000 folks on the job. Let's
Yeah.
put them to work
Mhm.
and expand from there. Yeah, I hear you. And I'm hoping that the legislators will see it. Like they
Mhm.
actually created a window of opportunity for us to lead in a way that no one else has. And I hope that we can step into that moving forward. But that's always a long conversation. And the ledge is only going to run until June. So we got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. And you guys only meet every other year, right? It's not yearly.
Every 2 years. So
Okay.
actually that's why South by Southwest is so important this year, and the
Yeah.
ledge, we're actually going to be bringing a lot of people together. So if you mentioned you were going to come out to Austin.
I think I might be able to, if my schedule allows it and everything. I think I'll be able to get out to Austin for that because I think it's important to show up to other states' legislatures too. I want to help Hawaii where I can too. It's harder to get out there.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that whole Hawaii near dear to my heart. That's all stationed over at Schofield.
Yeah.
So that's where I did my time, and I hold it near and dear, and they deserve something too.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should have support, and there's a ton
Mhm.
of great brands out there in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I so for Texas, with South by Southwest coming up, what we're doing is we'd love to invite our partners over in New Mexico to come out. It sounds like um, that second week, that's actually someone was just texting me. I'm so sorry. I thought I turned these off or put
You're
them
fine. No
on mute.
worries.
Uh, Someone was just texting that they've found a veteran for a panelist. So the second week of South by Southwest, like March 10th, I think, it's not 100% confirmed, but there are several events going on. What we're doing for Texas Cannabis Collective, we're trying to organize for the legislature. More details on that to come because we haven't been able to lock things in, but we are trying to do a lobby day at the legislature, and we're hoping for the morning of March 11th. Don't write that in stone just yet because we haven't confirmed it. But here's what you can put down in stone. On March 12th and 13th, because the programming for South by Southwest has kind of shifted away from a whole lot of any cannabis programming, and local operators used to really come together in March around South by Southwest to meet with partners from out of state and in state, but now we're not seeing any programming being provided for us. The Puebla group, which is a nonprofit that I've actually launched, um, is step into the plate, and we're going to provide programming. So we're going to do some cannabis and psychedelics programming. We shot a whole season of Highly Informed while we were at MJ Biz in Vegas, and it was such a great experience putting together the experts and the education for the community that we had committed to doing it again for season 3 of Highly Informed. So what does that mean for you guys? It means if you're coming out to Austin March 12th or 13th for South by Southwest, I'll have more information for you, Chad. But we'll have programming. Day 1 is going to be all about the legislature and the industry. So we're going to be doing a lot of B2B work, and I'm hoping to bring some legislators to our venue. To have conversations with operators in real time. I've seen that happen in other states. I had the privilege of being in New York for an On the Revel event. And when you bring everybody into the same room, you start to realize like we have way more in common than not. And you
Mhm.
can start to plant seeds for bigger conversations. So that's the intention behind that. We'll be talking about the ledge, updating folks, and helping operators to figure out how they can show up. Ideally, we'll be doing a whole lobby day the day before through the Texas Cannabis Collective. But again, we're still waiting on confirmation for the auditorium space at the Capitol. More to come. Like, I'll keep you posted.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'll share it too on my socials as well.
so not confirmed, not confirmed. Just wait. But what you can confirm is on March 12th, we'll have this educational day where we're going to do the legislature and then biz dev, B2B content, educational material, connecting folks with one another. I think we're going to do a speed mixer brunch where it's like a speed networking, get to know each other. So that way we can really come together and gel as an industry, because as you can tell, like we really dove into some really technical stuff today, and there's nuance to this. There's
Hmm.
people who are going to be in hemp, and there's people who are going to be on the medical side, and then there's going to be advocates who are, want to eventually get to home grow. Like we've got to bring all the folks together. So that's what the whole intention is behind Puebla, is to create the space, the advocacy for the people. We've got folks who have lobbyist organizations who can support them, but who do the people have? Hopefully they'll have Puebla. So we're throwing this event to do that. And then in the evening programming, we're going to have live music, comedy. It's going to be a whole thing. We're putting it together. Day 2, though, I'm so excited because day 2, March 13th, we're going to have athletic cannabis. We're going to be talking about sports recovery. I might even try to bring in ice baths. I'm not sure. We're still figuring it out, but it's all
Yeah.
going to be about human performance optimization and the wellness benefits of cannabis and psychedelics. So veterans, first responders, we're going to do something where they can get access to events and programming for free. We'll have limited tickets that we can do that for. But this day is all about athletes, veterans, first responders, and healing, bringing our legislators into that conversation. If they want to come as guests, not as legislators, they can just come and enjoy themselves. Day 1 is for all the business. Day 2 is for the love of the game. And at the end of that, we're hoping to do, actually, we're going to do a Canna Combat Club live jujitsu show. So that's the
Kind of
plan.
cool. Yeah.
But it's going to be a crazy week of events. You should definitely come out. I think the Outlaw Party is going to be kicking us off at the beginning of that week. Not 100% on the date on that, but y'all know Liz out at Grow House Media, and so she'll keep us informed. I don't know if anybody is going to be in town for the Texas Hemp Classic, but that also looks like it's going to be a pretty good time. We're going to be all the best THCA hemp operators, growers, cultivators are going to be out there. So there's a lot going on in Texas. If you're in New Mexico and you want to pop over, come on by.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if you guys are available for that time, go. I highly recommend it. Especially my people from the Sunland Park area. If you're from the Texas area, you work in New Mexico, this is a great time for you to go to your legislature and tell them firsthand what it's like to work in a legal industry, because you have that experience for being so close. You have a special little unique thing that is about you. Take some time off of work. You deserve it, and go over down to your state capital and go tell your legislators what you want. Because I tell people this all the time. It only takes 2 people for a constituent to turn into constituents. And then those constituents are what that representative goes off of. It's just those 2 people, because now it's constituents. So keep that in mind. It doesn't take that many people sometimes, but having all those voices and those many voices makes the work so much easier. And to be honest, it's a lot more, it's better because you get more done and everybody gets a voice. So thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. You shared so much, and yeah, you felt like you're ranting, but I was just letting you go because I was like, this
Oh
is
my
great
gosh.
information. There's so much
Well,
that people need to know and how to do this.
and I like to do the interviewing for the
Yeah,
most. I like to be the one asking the questions. So, but thank you so much for the opportunity to just share the updates and the education, share what's going on, and to reach out from Texas, because we are all connected in this, and we are all, there's something special about this region: California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. We're, somos gente. So we
sí,
need to
Simón.
work together, stay together, and, continue to elevate together. So thank you so much for having me on your show and being a host for this, and giving us a platform and a voice to help advocate for Texas. Thank you.
Of course, anytime, and it's been great, and I'm so glad that I met you 4 years ago, because you're doing such great things for Texas, over there, and also I failed to ask this to even talk about it. Your podcast, Highly Informed.
Oh
Make sure you guys
yeah.
give it a follow, give it a watch. It's
Yeah.
great information. She posts more clips than I do. I need to get better at posting clips on my show. You do
Mhm.
great at that. I suck at that. But
Oh,
I see the clips and everything, and it's great. You do a great job. So
thank
yeah,
you
go ahead
so
and
much.
check that out.
Yeah,
There needs
that's
to be more
highly.
state by state people like this.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna do it. We're building it, and I'm hoping
Awesome.
in the future, like goals for 2025, is to develop education and programming that we can get to the people, make it accessible.
Absolutely.
So that way we can do this interstate education thing and have these conversations. It is really important. It is really critical to share ideas across state lines and then to make decisions for yourself. So I really appreciate you. And if you are looking for highly informed, it's highly informed EN. I had to be special, like endocannabinoid, highly informed with an E. So I would love to see y'all there. Thank you so much for the shout out.
Of course. And thank you so much, Shaun, for joining me today. And everybody that's watching this episode, thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back next week with another episode, more updates on the New Mexico legislature. Of course, whatever goes on in the nation, if it's important, especially in the Texas market, I'll be here talking about it. And look out for me on Shaun's show sometime soon, hopefully. Maybe while I'm down there, we can do it. We'll check it out. But I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Remember, like, subscribe, share, whatever you got to do to stay in the know, because that's the way that you don't get screwed over. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. All right, cheers. Awesome. Thank you so much again for joining me, dude.
Woo! Yeah, you were frozen the whole way through. So I was like, I couldn't read any cues.
Oh, that's weird. On my side, everything was fine. That's so